So I just want to say good morning. Thank you everybody so much for being here. I've been really excited about this call in particular, but for those of you that are new to Breakthrough Mastermind Group, it's quite simple. The objective is really to empower others through the leverage of knowledge in order to become the best version of ourselves, both personally and professionally. So it's not really to pitch our business, it's really to share tips, tricks, market trends, things to really help people. And through that process, we'll definitely build relationships that will be long lasting, which is really exciting. We've built this foundation on what I call the 8 lifestyle categories. So as you all know, today's topic is family and relationships. So we've got Katrina and Whitney both speaking. I'm so excited to hear from them. I know that they have phenomenal content. They're brilliant minded ladies. So I couldn't be more excited to hear from them. But again, the way that this will work is that we will give them each an opportunity to speak for about 2 to 10 minutes, depending on what they want to share. And then after they have both spoken, we will open it up to questions. So if you guys don't mind, go ahead and just jot your questions down in the meantime while they're speaking. We'll just hold it to about 1 to 2 questions per person, and then and we'll really go from there. So first, I want to open the floor to Katrina. I really can't say enough about Katrina. I know that she is a wonderful mother, a wonderful wife. I've had the privilege of working with her directly, and she is absolutely phenomenal. She is an empowerment coach. You know, people that I speak to always have amazing relationships with her and amazing experiences. So I couldn't be more thrilled for her to be here in her presence. And then, you know, after she speaks, I'll introduce Whitney as well. So yeah, Katrina, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Wow. Well, thank you, Keegan. That was an introduction. I really appreciate that. So I'm Katrina, and I want to speak to you today. I'm a life coach. I focus on empowerment, mindset, confidence. I want to talk to you today about boundaries within your relationships, because they are kind of the critical piece of the puzzle that allow you to have those functional relationships, whether it's, you know, an intimate relationship or family relationships or with your employer or coworkers. That's kind of the pivotal piece that leads you into a healthy relationship domain. So over the weekend, we were in a social situation and we were all sitting together, but socially distant, you know, maybe not 6 feet apart. We were outside and we were about maybe 3 feet apart. And a new person came into the group and sat about 18 inches from someone else. And when he started to talk, he reached over and put his hand on the other person's arm. And you could feel the cringe within the group. You could feel that was really awkward, uncomfortable for the person who was sitting there and didn't know if he should withdraw his arm or what he should do. And it was not the proper behavior for someone who had just met people in the group. And it was really uncomfortable. And that's kind of that's a great example of breaching of a boundary. And so the person who did that probably doesn't understand or doesn't respect other people's boundaries. So when we think about boundaries, we can think of them in terms of fences, delineating our property lines and ownership. So fences make good neighbors, right? Well, boundaries make for good relationships because they delineate the lines in terms of acceptable behavior that's set out between the two people in the relationship. So what kind of, boundaries are we talking about? Well, in the example that I just mentioned, we're talking about physical boundaries. Like there's a breach of space, how the proximity you leave between people when someone steps too close and you're like, yikes. And also the hand on the arm was an actual physical touch when you don't want someone to do that, right? That's a physical boundary. We have boundaries around our time, like when your boss asks you to stay late at work and you have to figure out with your priorities and obligations, maybe your child has soccer, can you do that for them? We have boundaries around our possessions, what we'll lend and who will lend them to. And then we have emotional boundaries, which is a big one. That's the key when we're talking about, especially familial and intimate relationships. Emotional boundaries are key to having healthy relationships. So when we're talking about emotional boundaries, we're literally talking about the guidelines that you establish as to what you will and won't tolerate, how you communicate your needs to your partner, and the parameters around acceptable behavior within your relationship. These are your emotional limits, your physical barriers, and your mental blocks that we put into place to protect ourselves from getting used, manipulated, or hurt by other people. And this extends to any relationship, whether it's a friendship, a coworker, a boss, romantic relationship. Boundaries are essential to healthy relationships because it means that you understand what your limits are and that you're willing to speak to that to another person. So why are they important? Well, boundaries are a reflection of how we fundamentally view ourselves. The more we value ourselves, the more comfortable we will be with setting and expressing our limits. If we have low self-esteem and low self-worth, we don't recognize our own importance in relation to other people. And so boundaries can be fluid or, non-existent altogether. When you're able to establish healthy personal boundaries with people, you're communicating that you respect yourself and that you value your time. Emotional boundaries protect your sense of self-esteem and ability to separate your feelings from other people's feelings. When you have weak emotional boundaries, you can be greatly affected by other people's words, their thoughts, their actions, and end up feeling bruised, wounded, and battered. So I wanted to just jump into, Keegan, will you keep me on track? I'm not timing this. And so I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, okay, awesome. So where am I at right now?
You're doing great. You still have plenty of time.
Okay, cool. So why do we find it hard to say no? I think inherently we believe that boundaries are about division, right? About creating fake walls and about separation or being mean. We're being selfish. We're not caring about other people's needs as much as our own, right? We're also we're socialized to be accommodating to other people. We're always thinking about their needs. And sometimes we prioritize their needs above our own. We also care what other people think. We want them to like us, right? We care what they think about us. Sometimes we care about what they think about us more than we care about what we think about ourselves. So when we prioritize ourselves or say no to something, we might have feelings of guilt or anxiety at putting our own needs first, and that feels uncomfortable. But I want to encourage you to remember that your needs are important. They are ultimately, important to your overall feeling of wellness and fulfillment in your life. You also cannot simultaneously create a boundary for yourself and take care of someone else's feelings. I'm good.
Beautiful. I wrote a lot of questions down. So
I'm going to stop there.
Guys, what we're going to do is we're just going to jot these down. I'm going to introduce Whitney, and then we're going to open the floor up for questions. So thank you so much, Katrina. I took a lot of notes. That was some really good information. Guys, I just want to introduce Whitney now. Absolutely. Whitney, again, is an individual that I've had the pleasure of meeting, working with, speaking with. She's got a really, really cool concept. So by the way, I highly recommend that you speak with both Katrina and Whitney. I mean, they have so much incredible knowledge, but Whitney is also a mother and she is a love coach. So she's got a really cool concept, as most of you know, with COVID and kind of the restrictions that we've all been aware of and experienced. There's a difference in the dating world and how we approach love and how we find those people. So I know a lot of people on this call are already, in relationships and that's okay. They're are boundaries like Katrina talked about, but there's also a level of information that can make us better lovers, better partners. So, Whitney's got some phenomenal information. She's got a lot of phenomenal resources. Like I mentioned, she is a love coach, and I would definitely get some time with her, but I'm so excited to hear what she has to speak about. So Whitney, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Again, thank you so much for organizing this, for everything. Katrina, thank you. That was awesome. Boundaries are so important for all of our relationships. So yes, as Keegan mentioned, I'm a love coach. I work only with women currently, and I help women to love themselves, love their life, and attract lasting love. We break through all the blind spots, limiting beliefs, fears, and there's a lot of those when it comes to relationships. So what I wanted to focus on today, and I have some PowerPoint slides. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, but I figure a little bit of a visual might be good. So Keegan, if you could enable my screen sharing, I'll bring that up. And what I want to talk about today is self-compassion. We talk a lot about love and self-love, but women especially will think that self-love means going to get a manicure and pedicure and get your hair done. And it's so silly because, yeah, that's great, but that's not what real love is. That's totally superficial. But what I find the number one component for self-love is having self-compassion. And self-compassion is made up of 3 steps. The first step is mindfulness.
Can I stop you real quick? I'm so sorry. I'm like technologically illiterate. Can somebody help me with how I can let her share her screen? I see the ellipses. Is it through the ellipses on the top right?
Yeah, sure.
I think
First of all, you need to make Whitney the co-host,
Okay, got it.
and yeah, and then Whitney can then and
Perfect.
now Whitney, can you share your screen? Yeah, perfect.
Beautiful. Thank you, Krishev. Thank you.
Okay, you guys see that fine? Okay, so the first step is mindfulness, which I know that you guys are probably all aware of and all work with your clients on. This is, self-compassion is important for anyone and everyone, which is why this is the topic that I thought I would share with you guys. Mindfulness means being aware of the present moment, in the present moment, not in the past, not in the future, having clarity of the situation, noticing your thoughts, your physical feelings, your sensations, and also being aware without resistance or avoidance. So many of us, as soon as something becomes emotional, or we get disappointed, or we're down, we want to resist it and avoid it. The second step is self-kindness. Many of us just naturally have this knee-jerk reaction to judge, criticize, and harm ourselves. Oh, you didn't get the promotion, you stupid loser. Why did you even think you could get it? We're so mean, and we need to be treating ourselves like we would treat a little kid, a little small child version of ourselves, or your best friend. You wouldn't berate your best friend for failing at something. So being kind, understanding, patient, supportive, encouraging, instead of attacking ourselves. When life gets tough, we tend to kick ourselves when we're down. And what we really need is to soothe and comfort ourselves. And that helps us to stay level-headed, be able to take action. The third piece of self-compassion is common humanity. And this is most typically believing or saying to yourself, everyone goes through this. Suffering is part of the human existence. Other people have been through this before. Part of my story is that I'm a widow, and my husband passed away at just 37 years old. And that was in 2017. And, among many other things, I remember meeting other widows who sort of came out of the woodwork to show me that there is life beyond that, and that you can get through it. And that is to me a prime example of that common humanity, to hang in there, that this too shall pass. So the next thing I want to mention is that self-compassion is not self-esteem. So self-esteem is highly overrated. According to the research, self-esteem means feeling good about yourself and your abilities. But it often involves comparisons and this need to feel special and above average, which is shown to lead to narcissism, constant comparison with others, ego defensive anger, prejudice, among other things. So having high self-esteem is contingent on how good you feel about yourself and your abilities. So when you fail, self-esteem is not there. When you fail, your self-esteem goes down. So self-compassion, on the other hand, it's always there for you. Whether you're doing well or you're not doing well, whether you need comfort or you need motivation, even if you need a kick in the butt, you can have self-compassion and say, with awareness, step one, I really need to get moving and get this done. Step two, kindness. You're a very smart person. You're very capable. I know you can do this. And then common humanity. Other people have been able to do this too, and you're going to be able to do it. So it doesn't mean that we just give ourselves excuses. It means that we are just kind. With self-compassion, your self-worth doesn't require you to be better than others. We can't all be above average. Sorry. We want to be our best version of ourselves, whatever that means. And self-compassion also provides more stability to hold negative feelings and difficult emotions. People who practice self-compassion are better able to get through big life changes like divorce and a death of a loved one, and become more resilient and have inner strength. So I'll share with you just a couple of barriers that we commonly have to self-compassion. One is we think, I don't want to have a self-pity party, but this is actually the antidote to self-pity. Instead of having self-pity, we relate to common humanity. So we know, hey, I'm not the only one that's been through this. We're encouraging, and by the encouragement, it can create opportunities to take action instead of just wallowing. A lot of people think I have to be hard on myself to get things done. Most of you probably know that's not true. In fact, self-criticism is one of the worst motivators. It creates low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and it can cause people to go into an emotional downward spiral. I don't want to make excuses for myself. I think of it this way: a kind, compassionate parent would not let their kid lay in bed and eat cookies all day just because they say, I want to lay in bed and eat cookies all day. So when you're compassionate to yourself, you don't let yourself do that either. You say, I know you want to lay in bed and eat cookies all day, but you got to be healthy. You got to eat your veggies. You got to, so people who practice self-compassion are actually more likely to focus on their long-term health and success than the short-term. And then another common barrier to self-compassion is that we get caught up in stories. And again, this is a common theme that I know you guys all know about, but we get caught up in the overanalyzing, the ruminating, well, what if I could have said this and he said this, and what does this mean? I hear this all the time from people dating. They say, well, he said this, or he didn't say this. What does it mean? But instead of getting caught up in the stories, it's better to just take a step back, get present, feel what you're feeling, notice it, and get a bigger picture view. So I'll share with you a few benefits. The first is that having self-compassion counteracts the physical response to stress of fight, flight, or freeze. So fight is counteracted by having kindness. Flight is counteracted by having awareness. And flight is counteracted by having common humanity. Instead of isolation and running away, you're with other people. You're related and connected to other people. And freeze is counteracted by having awareness. So instead of just freezing, pausing, freaking out, we are able to be aware, to sit with it, to sit with the discomfort. And it actually changes your autonomic nervous system, and it will relax your body and counteract stress. So it reduces anxiety, depression, stress, and shame, all while increasing happiness, life satisfaction, self-confidence, and physical health. Enhances our overall well-being, improves mental clarity and focus. Have you ever been in that downward spiral of emotion where you think, oh, I didn't get this thing that I wanted, this person broke up with me, or I'm having a fight, or I lost the job. And so you feel down. And then when you feel down, you start thinking negative thoughts. Oh, and this happened. And then you feel worse. And then you think worse. And then you feel worse. And you go down in this downward spiral. You can't do your job. You can't focus. You can't create something. So that downward spiral is, really counterproductive. And having self-compassion, remaining present in the moment, can help with your clarity, focus. It also helps to increase our accountability, compromise, apologize, and to be able to forgive. And self-compassion, as you guys are probably gathering, will grow into compassion for others. And as Katrina said, it's extremely important to have boundaries, and many people are more compassionate with others than they are with themselves. And so we start with self-compassion, and this is one of the foundations of my program, along with physical embodiment. But we have to learn to be compassionate with ourselves before we can learn to be compassionate with others while having good boundaries. Benefits also include having an ability to see multiple perspectives, to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to see something in the gray area, that it's not just black and white. There's not only two options, there's other possibilities. We also become less likely to avoid our difficult emotions, to disembody or numb out, and less likely to ruminate or wallow in how bad things are, that downward spiral. It also leads us to feeling more socially connected, since the common humanity is peace. And I found this fascinating, but among patients with diabetes, simply practicing self-compassion helped them to stabilize their glucose levels. So this shows how intimately connected your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual selves are. So I know we're on keeping track of time, and I have a few ideas for you to practice self-compassion if you want me to continue and show you these.
Yeah, if you don't mind just doing this as the last slide, Whitney, but this is great. Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, great. So it's during our difficult times that we need self-compassion the most. Be kind to yourself. Say nice things like, I love you. You did your best. You could do it. You're smart. You're capable. Don't isolate yourself. You don't have to be alone. Know that everyone goes through this. Reach out for help. Reach out to a colleague, a family member, anyone that you care about. And we want to work to create a state of warm-hearted, patient-connected presence. And another practice that goes hand in hand with self-compassion is a loving kindness meditation, where we focus on the phrases, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. Allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling without judgment, disappointment, or shame. Those are the triggers for that downward spiral, when you have a thought and then you judge it, or then you criticize it. Asking yourself, what do I need, is huge. When we can take care of our own needs, we become less reliant on other people filling our needs. And rather than avoiding our pain or going numb, I encourage you to turn towards and acknowledge the suffering and be with the pain long enough to respond with care and kindness. So that is self-compassion.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful job. I mean, wow. Katrina, Whitney, awesome information. I took so many notes. I loved that. You hit a lot of points for me. I've got a lot of questions as well. But first, I'd like to open it up to the group. If anybody has questions for either Katrina or Whitney, now's your chance.
I have less of a question, more of a comment. I've definitely noticed I'm more able to control the stress and anxiety in myself when I mess up or something doesn't go perfectly right. Um, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes down to myself. I do like to perfect my work, but I know that there's a line there between healthy and not. Um, but my girlfriend doesn't have that same control, and she has a lot of anxiety and stress, and I don't know how to communicate that, how to guide her better through those tough moments. I'm wondering if you had any input on what's an easy way other than meditation or you know therapy, something that I can say maybe or do as an activity. Like I've tried walking and just saying, let's go, get up, let's go, we gotta go for a walk. That sometimes helps, but not every time. And wondering if you have any other little hacks.
Yes, absolutely. So my answer would be the 3 steps. It would be to teach her these 3 steps and allow her to practice these 3 steps on her own. Start practicing them when you feel okay, and then start practicing them when you get into a funk or when you're disappointed. Those 3 steps will bring you back to I'm present, I'm conscious, I know that things are not the end of the world, I'm not going to exaggerate, and I'm going to stay realistic. I recognize that I'm not alone, that I have the support of my loving boyfriend, that I have other people, that I have a network of people that love me, and to be kind to yourself. And the kindness piece is the most difficult because a lot of people have programming from their parents or other people or just their own perfectionism, comparison, that the internal dialogue just immediately goes to a negative place. So the awareness is to recognize what thoughts are coming to your mind. Is it you're stupid? Is it I hate you? Is it something negative? And how can you turn that around to something positive? But I'd like to add something else too. I mentioned that I only work with women. So far, I started out as a matchmaker, and I primarily had female clients and just started learning all the ways that they were self-sabotaging. But what I've learned also is a lot about masculine and feminine energy. So we all have the yin and yang energy within us. We all have masculine energy to tap into and feminine. So it's not just a male female thing, but women who lead with their feminine energy are much more likely to have very deep emotions, to have emotional waves that go up and go down. And so it makes sense to me that you're saying, well, I've kind of learned to manage this stuff, but my partner who's female is struggling because once a big wave of emotion comes, it kind of takes over and she's riding that big wave. So again, I go back to the 3 steps. It really, really does help to learn them and start practicing them daily.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Katrina, did you want to add anything?
So the only thing that I would add onto Whitney's, summary or information, Roberto, would be that, stress is something that we all deal with. And certainly anxiety over the past year has been massive for most people. Like that's just something, nobody knows what the future holds. We're all kind of in this waiting game, this limbo. But when it comes to stress and anxiety, I feel like, developing your own self-care routine, your rituals that kind of energize you. So I'm speaking for your girlfriend specifically because you've figured out how to manage that. She's still struggling with figuring out, what she should do to cope with that. And you said that when she's stressed or anxious, you say, hey, let's go outside for a walk or a run or whatever. It would be really beneficial for her to develop those strategies herself. So whatever it is that she does, not the hair and the nails or whatever, not those things, but specifically, is she taking care of her diet? Is she exercising? Does she go for a walk? Does she meditate? Does she journal? What are the things that she's doing actively to manage and mitigate the effects of stress, to deal with her anxiety, but to also create that resilience, create that buffer against, so that when something happens, it's not this big, huge thing, but it's a big, huge wave of emotion, but maybe it's a little bit more along, the center channel, a little bit less of a reaction. So self-care would be the biggest component that I see, for her managing that moving forward. And that looks like whatever works for her, whatever, if she needs to sit and be quiet and meditate for 10 minutes, if she needs to practice deep breathing, if she needs to journal every morning, um, whatever that looks like for her.
Yeah, yeah, she's actually the one that's better at that than I am. I'm some sort of freak of nature, and nothing phases me apparently. But when she's the one that's always eating healthy, and she's the one that exercises almost every day. So she has these things in place, but it's not that it's every day these anxiety attacks come. She's an actor, so like there's no work right now. Broadway's shut down, and I think it's deeper than that. It's not just work, but it's like a self unimportance, and just her self-esteem with her life, and how much money she's put into college and how that's not paying off now.
Right.
You know what I mean? That type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those buffers, she's worked on them and still has the issues. Anyways, I don't want to take too much time with this, but that's my dilemma I'm trying to break through.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. If it has to do with her worth, then that's we all struggle with that, putting that out there. But certainly if it has to do with her worth, then, that's a different entity altogether. But again, the self-care, and a daily, so if you have your self-care toolbox, right? Like these are the things that I can choose from. So every day I make sure that I eat healthy, and I do my workout in the morning, and I take a walk every day. So there's like a base of what you do. And then there's like, today's kind of a crap day. I'm going to add in a meditation, and I might do that 3 times today. Just sit for 10 minutes and get really present. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular. It can just be getting really mindful and really present with how you're feeling. Right. And so sometimes it's adding in, I need to journal. I need to journal twice. I need to go sit in the sunshine for 10 minutes. But identifying the things that energize her and putting those in place on a recurring basis every single day. And then having like extra things that you can grab in your toolbox on those days when you really need it.
I'd like
I agree. Having that little journal helps.
Yeah, I'd like to throw something in, Roberto. So I think back to this story that Joe Rogan shares, and he has this dog named Frank Sinatra. And the dog goes outside every day and chases these lizards. And he gets so excited for it, right? He goes to the back door and he looks through the glass, and he's looking to see if there are any new lizards out there for the day. And he has this sense of purpose and fulfillment. So as Katrina mentioned, there has been this undecided, kind of uncommon ground that we're all on because of COVID and the restrictions and everything that's going on through that. So it sounds to me like at this point in her situation, there's an element of purpose or fulfillment that may not be present, right? Because you had mentioned she's an actor or an actress, and Broadway's not open right now, right? So, this is just a side note, but I'm just curious if there are other avenues that she could potentially explore through maybe a virtual platform where she could explore that fulfillment and that purpose and kind of get back to the roots of it. So that way, it sounds like she's got the mind and the body and some of these other things down, and she's doing really well with those. And again, I say that from the 8 lifestyle categories, but maybe it's that sense of purpose that could use a little bit of exploration. So that's just my tidbit there. But anyway, does anybody else have any other questions for Katrina or Whitney?
Yeah, I do. So hi girls. Fantastic presentation, first of all. I'm from a rural environment, and I just moved to New York City. And so I'm in a communal living situation. And one of the big tools in my toolbox has always been playing music, playing guitar, singing. And I find myself worried about disturbing the people that I'm living with. And so a big tool in my toolbox is now taken away. And I find myself more stressed and more anxious because I don't have that big tool that I usually, that big outlet that I usually use in order to relieve anxiety and stress. So I was kind of wondering, do you guys have any suggestions, maybe ideas, or what's your thoughts on that?
So, Colin, do you know that it's bothering other people, or are you just being considerate?
No, I don't know that. I'm just preemptively finding myself thinking that way.
Right. So, and that's being considerate of other people, but you're back in the situation of putting someone else's needs or what we perceive to be their needs before your own needs, right? And so, and then we've got this big like, ooh, I might be upsetting other people by playing my music. And so can you just voice the concern? Because it lurks in the shadows,
Yeah,
right? This I might be upsetting other people. Is lurking in the shadows and it's making you change your behavior. Can you just give voice to that and speak to that and say, I'd like to know if this is an issue?
absolutely. Absolutely, it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and Colin, I like to always remind people that there's so much gray area and so many possibilities and opportunities. Instead of thinking either I play music or I don't play music, try to think of other possibilities. Maybe you can find other people that want to play with you. Maybe you can host an event where you guys all come together and sit around and all play instruments and sing together. Or maybe you go somewhere else to play music. Or, I would encourage you to think of ways that you can continue to have this artistic expression, because it seems like it's a very healthy, positive for you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, beautiful points. And again, I mean, again, this all circles back to the point of relationships, and like Katrina had mentioned those boundaries, and like Whitney had mentioned the self-esteem and taking that element out of it, but more like the self-awareness. So I have a bunch of stuff, but I definitely want to give the floor to other people and give you guys opportunities to ask questions or voice opinions. So does anybody else have anything that they would like to share or comment? Okay, cool. So I just want to say again, Katrina, Whitney, excellent job. Some of the notes that I took are really based around those boundaries, the limits, the values, from Katrina, overcoming that selfish feeling. Whitney, I loved how you mentioned the limiting beliefs and the self-talk and the sense of humility and all these other various things as well. So I do have a couple questions. I would really like to know, specifically, Katrina, are there tactics or maybe methods that you would use in terms of communicating those boundaries? So in other words, let's say that Ashley and I were setting up a particular boundary of communication. Is there a delicate way or maybe an appropriate way to establish those boundaries through communication without upsetting the emotional side for the partner or the other person that's involved?
So Keegan, you're wondering if there's a way to address the boundary, to communicate the boundary.
Correct.
Without upsetting the other person. So I think one of the last things I said was you cannot simultaneously establish a boundary and protect another person's feelings. It does not work that way, because you're either putting yourself first and saying, this is what I need, or you're putting the other person first and saying, this is what they need. And they need me not to address that, so I'm not going to. But that's going to lead you down a path of so much more dysfunction in your relationship. And so I don't know that it's not your responsibility to make sure that their feelings aren't hurt. Which I know can sound really cruel, but we're not responsible for someone else's emotional, the way they feel. We're not responsible for that. We're responsible in the relationship for communicating what we need and what's okay and what's not okay. and having a conversation around that. But there's no way for you to protect them, and that's not your job.
Beautiful. And then my next question, then I'm going to turn it over to Whitney because I have a couple of questions for you as well, Whitney. My next question, Katrina, is when we talk about the values, I'm a really firm believer in identifying your values. I think that there may be a difference between core values and just standard values. So I wonder if you have any feedback on just values as a whole, and maybe whether that's, what a value is or how to establish them, or anything about values.
Well, yeah. So, I think the process in creating your boundaries and understanding your own boundaries is to first get to know yourself, like to know what you want, to know what you like, what you don't like, what's okay and what's not okay. And don't judge yourself for those things. Just get to know what's okay with you. And part of that is assessing your values and your priorities and what's important. And, what is it that takes a priority in your life? And so, when you're establishing who you are and what you want and what you don't want, values plays a big role. But when you know what that looks like for you, when you know what's important to you, it's way easier to create your boundaries, to create that acceptable way of behaving within a relationship.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So awesome stuff. And again, just to share with the group, I think that, like Katrina was mentioning, you really have to have that self-awareness, and Whitney talked about that as well. But being able to establish those values are just so critical, because if you have to make a decision, for example, and you already know what your values are, there's no hesitation. You can quite easily make that decision because you know what your values are. So yeah, excellent points. And then Katrina, Whitney, just to shift it over to you. You mentioned a lot of really great points. I really liked how you talked about the 3 steps and how that worked for you. With a little bit of context, I'm gonna share this first, but a lot of people talk about being in the present. And one of the things that works for me personally, and again, I would love your feedback and maybe some of the things that work for you. But one of the things that worked really well for me in the past in terms of present is to submerge myself into nature. And the reason that's been so advantageous for me is because nature is always in the present. You can go and sit by a river, for example, and the water's flowing and it doesn't stop for the rock. It doesn't stop for anything. And the birds are going to continue to fly. And it's just always in the present. So for me personally, that's been a really good tip for me. I'm curious if you have other tips. I know that you had talked a little bit about meditation, but do you have any other tips or tricks or maybe ways to help people be in the present? And the reason I ask is because I think that really circles around self-awareness.
Yes, absolutely. And nature is awesome for that. It's great. And we should all be spending as much time in nature as we can instead of these silly boxes with furniture and chairs and screens. But yes, definitely. Meditation is great. Meditation is related to masculine energy. When you think of masculine energy being challenge and drive and stillness, I teach a practice called feminine flow, which is sort of a combination of meditation and dance. So you just sort of let your body flow while you drop out of your mind and into your body. So it's kind of like a meditation where you get to flow and dance to music. And that works really, really, really amazingly well with women, to help them to be more self-aware, to connect with their body, connect with their emotions, let things out. Oftentimes emotions will start to purge. Another quick and easy tip for being present and mindful and aware is 5 senses, 5 things. So we have 5 senses. Find 5 things that you could see. And there's a lot of variations of this you guys have probably heard of, but I see a pink folder, a red thing, a furry cat on my lap. So you name 5 things, then you touch 5 things. Okay, I'm touching this soft cat's fur, I'm touching the computer, touching a piece of paper, and I'm touching this. And then smell, you know, okay, I can smell my perfume. What else can I smell? I smell a candle in the distance. And then sometimes you can do taste, sometimes not, but usually if you do that, see 5 things, touch 5 things, listen for 5 sounds, you know, you could hear an airplane going by or a car going by, you know, give yourself that time to focus on that, and it will often help to break out of a mood or just recenter yourself or even get a song out of your head.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. The 5 by 5, for the senses. One of the things that I've learned in my experience is that, you know, a little bit of what Whitney's talking about here is sensory acuity. And there are several practices that you can do to identify the sense that you most well respond to. So for example, if I were to ask you about a favorite memory, a favorite story, a favorite experience, you may start to identify that by visuals, or maybe it's a kinesthetic approach, whatever that looks like. So it's really important to identify what your strengths are in those 5 senses. But I really love the 5 by 5 because that might be a really effective way for people to actually establish what those are. I've got one last question, but anyway, does anybody else have another question? I know we're going through a lot of different really cool information. Does anybody else have any more questions?
Yes.
Krishiv, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that cold showers instantly help in staying in the present moment. But what are your thoughts? Like a cold shower that, you know, shakes you a little.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
I've done a little research on this as well, and I've practiced it. And cold showers are very good for you physically. It does wake up your body. It's also good for starting your day in a way, sort of like the saying of eat that frog, where you do something difficult in the morning and then the rest of the day seems a little bit easier. So if you can withstand a freezing cold shower for whatever length of time in the morning, it can set you up to take on challenges throughout the day. I would also add a caveat to say, sometimes we need a cold shower and sometimes we need a hot tub. You know, going along with self-compassion, sometimes we need to push ourselves to do more, but sometimes it can be too much and we can lead to burnout, overload, frustration, you know, losing self-worth. So sometimes it's appropriate to take a break, have a nice warm cozy bath, and let that be your therapy of the day. But both are effective, and the cold shower is a really powerful practice when you get into it.
Would you say that a cold shower in the morning and a warm shower perhaps in the evening or night would be a good way to strike balance between both?
I think so. I think it would be a nice reward to look forward to at the end of the day, you know, to say, here's what I want to accomplish today. Here's how I want to be today. And when you do that, at the end of the day, you can feel very comforted in this nice warm shower and feeling good about what you accomplished throughout the day. Yeah, that sounds like a great practice. Requires a bit of consistency for sure.
Yes.
I think that first cold shower, Krishiv, is going to be a tough one.
I've been through that, and it actually, yeah. There's a friend of mine, and if we've got time, well, just share a little story. He lives in Finland, And even in winters, he jumps into the lake when it's like 2 degrees outside, and then he runs his way back home. And he has inspired me to like take cold showers. But then the other day, somebody else in my circle said that it actually helps you bring to your present moment.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's why I thought this was relevant, so I asked it.
Yeah. There's also ways that you can prepare your body for it. So if you've ever heard of Wim Hof, he teaches a breathing method that allows you to warm up your core and really prepare you. He climbed Mount Everest barefoot or something like without a shirt. Like, he's a crazy guy, but he teaches a method that really works, and he's all about cold immersion. So you can learn practices to prepare yourself for it, because if someone just wakes up and decides to jump into a freezing cold lake in the middle of winter, they could get hypothermia, they could, but when you do the practices of the breath work and preparing yourself mentally and physically, then it you become so much more resilient, and that's the purpose.
Beautiful points. So guys, we're about to close out. I just want to share one last thing on family and relationships. So I've got 2 parts here, but I'm sure that all of us have an experience, whether it's family, a coworker, a relationship in some capacity, where, and both of the wonderful coaches had mentioned this today, but sometimes we say things that we don't mean, or maybe we act out of emotion, and our emotion is really high and our logic is low. So a lot of times, what I've found is that sometimes we hold on to those bad experiences, and it may be days or weeks or months or maybe even years. So one of the things that I find to be really, really critical in those moments is you reach out to that person, and whether it's a text or a call or a letter or an email, whatever's comfortable for you. But I've found that it's really critical to let go of that baggage. And one of the ways to do that, like I mentioned, is to reach out to that individual and not really make it about you, but just share an experience, a memory, something that you're really grateful for or fond of. Hey, look, I know we ended on bad terms, but I just can't tell you how many times the memories that we've shared together have come up into my present life. And I'm just truly grateful for the good times that we had together. I think back to an experience for myself when my stepdad was very abusive and kind of caused a lot of trauma for me growing up. And it takes a lot of willpower and character, but it lets you release that baggage. So I would write a letter to him. I've done this in the past. I wrote a letter and just said, hey, look, I need you to understand some of the ways that I've felt about this situation, but I don't hold it against you anymore, and just let it go. So it's really critical, again, back to what Whitney said with self-awareness and what Katrina said with boundaries and self-worth. Just let the baggage go, be the good person, use that willpower, use that strength, and make yourself better, because it just brings you down to hold on to that negative energy. So look, this was an incredible call. I got a lot of wonderful notes, a lot of really good information. I want to thank everybody so much for being on here. Whitney, I would ask, if you're open to it, if you would be willing to share some of those slides in the Slack group or the Facebook page, whatever you're more comfortable with. But I would like to review some of that stuff. I really want to see more about the 3 steps and some of the self-compassion. I just want to say again, thank you so much. Katrina, Whitney, I love the feedback. I love the information. Guys, if you haven't spoken with them, they're phenomenal coaches. Definitely get the chance, reach out, have a conversation, reach out on LinkedIn or send an email. I saw some people speaking in the group chat, so that's incredible. But I just want to thank you all so much. This has been a great call, again, on family and relationships. And you guys are awesome. Don't forget, you are loved. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks, Keegan.